everybody, and welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast, episode 244. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by the Charles Xavier and Blackagar Boltigan of LA.
I get to be Professor X. He can be Blackagar Boltigan.
I'm Black Bolt. He's my favorite Marvel character. If you know,
Sucks.
you know.
Sucks.
And if you don't, you
Sucks.
fucking don't.
Sucks.
Okay, can you tell what we were talking about right before we started rolling?
Alex has some unique taste.
No.
The amount of love you spew for X-Men and then to come out of nowhere and be like, oh yeah, but Blackagar Boltigan is my favorite. It's just like, what?
Creations of the same guy. They're both excellent and awesome.
So why didn't you enjoy X-Men v Inhumans, the event, or whatever it was?
Because it was not good. It wasn't
the
well written.
Inhumans suck. Anyway, hi everyone listening. Hi everyone. Alex is standing a character named Black Bolt, whose real name is Blackagar Boltigan, and that's
I'm not standing him. I'm not in love with him. He's just good.
He's not good. He's not good.
This man has not read one single Inhumans comic book, and he's trying to tell me Black Bolt is not good.
Dude, that's why, it's like saying my favorite fucking X, mutant is Toad.
Toad from Ray Park?
Yeah. I actually, Ray Park,
Oh, he's sick. But
yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna fight. I'm actually not gonna fight you on that. I love that.
His character in the first one was when he twirled the thing just like a double-bladed lightsaber.
Right, because he was literally only known for that.
Yep.
Doesn't Storm strike him with lightning and then say some
She says,
"You know what happened?
What happened? Yeah. Oh my god, one of the worst lines in movie history.
What is it?
Do you know what happens to a toad when it gets struck by lightning?
And then she's like, "Same thing as everything else." It's the dumbest. The dumbest line in movie history.
Wolverine's like, what was that about? She's like, I had nothing. I'm sorry.
That's why Halle Berry was doing a weird accent with Storm.
She kind of gave it up after a movie.
100% gave it up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank God.
Maybe she just lived in New York long enough that she kind of just assimilated. I don't know. Storm, second place to Blackagar Boltigan as baddest ass.
I'm with you. No, she's way cooler than Black Bolt.
Agreed.
The episode 1 in X-Men 97 where she strikes sand with lightning and turns it to glass. It's just like...
You need to read Al Ewing, X-Men Red. You will lose your mind. Jesse, you should read that too. You will lose your mind. That is not the Inhumans, so you won't have to clown on it. It's just real good.
Just like the stuff we put on our Patreon.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do that because this is a very highly structured episode, and so we're going to pretend like you didn't even say that, and I'm just going to jump right into my outline. So look, folks,
give me a warning. I would have.
There's no warnings needed. There's no warnings needed. Nobody gets a warning when this guy's coming around.
Before we dive in, because this is going to be maybe the biggest topic we've done, certainly the one with the most involved people doing research, including you being the lead, obviously doing a ton of it. We have Deanna in on this. I'm in on this. Jesse's just along for the ride.
I don't know what this is.
Yeah, that's great.
A shout out to R2R2 again on our subreddit for drawing Richard Vagina. The most
oh my God.
Amazing fucking
it's
dentist.
I listen to the voice and then I look at the picture and I see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's exactly the kind of person I also pictured when the voice was happening.
I love that. And that's on the subreddit, right?
Yes.
You can go see that at r/Chilluminati pod. So look, folks, it's time for another enormous undertaking here on the show, a topic which has claimed many victims, both in terms of actual human life lost and just
our lives in books.
People who have dedicated their lives to a mystery that is so deep and so perfectly exemplifies a lot of the types of problems that Americans romantically see in themselves today. It's kind of like a very symbolic crime case, especially the types of Americans with the bravery to actually look back in the past and learn about who we are and internalize it and try and be better. But, before we get into any of that, I'm just going to attempt to lay out this whole complicated structure again for everybody out there interested in exactly what wild strangeness it is I'm building to in 2024, because I have all this extra time that I spend doing my thing in my episodes. Or is the truth just exactly what Jesse thinks it is? A bunch of meaningless noise by someone half clever who cares less about the big picture and more about staying in the spotlight.
Alex Fossiani, right?
Or am I talking about the subject of today's episode? Perhaps?
Oh, fuck!
Anyway,
all of a sudden I had the angry video game nerd theme song playing in my head.
He's gonna kill you in the past.
Dude, imagine an angry video game nerd version of a true crime YouTuber. What would that even be like?
There's probably a subreddit that has exactly that same tone. Anyway, yes, as you likely already know, because I have an annoying but meticulous habit of constantly recapping for everybody that I'm doing 8 major episodes this year tied to 8 different key phrases, and all of them start with the letter H. There have been rumblings in the past about a mysterious episode H8, but really, what does it all mean? And can you use my keywords
What does it all mean?
to help you predict what topics I'm covering next?
H8 helium on the periodic table or something?
Look, no. First, there was Hidden, about defense contractors hiding UFO technology in plain sight. That was Hidden. Then there was Heavyweights, covering some of the strangest mysteries in the history of the WWE. Third, it was Horse, which was a reference to the giant blue demon horse in front of the bizarrely cryptic and like kind of chill vibes cryptic Denver airport.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Up now, this is the last one we did. We got 3 chunky episodes on the mystical and psychedelic aspects of dreams, courtesy of our ever-present and very, very cool-headed overlords, the Chilluminati.
And thanks for Pat for being there.
Yeah, shout-outs to Pat. And with this being the 5th episode in the sequence, we have crossed the halfway point with the keyword hello, which is now revealed to be my very special multi-part miniseries on the Zodiac Killer, which I'm officially calling Zodiac, the Great American Rabbit Hole.
I'm going to go ahead and put on paper. We solved it.
We did not solve it. We're just going to point at somebody who I think solved it. And before we get any more distracted by that,
Same thing.
Yeah. The other 3 remaining keywords in the list are huge, him again, and hero. Huge, him again, and hero. Write them down. Discuss them on the subreddit that I was talking about earlier. Yeah. Guess what else I'm going to do episodes on and what this is all leading to now that I figured it all out.
What topic do you think he's going to be revisiting for him again?
Right? I don't know. Who knows?
It's JFK.
Probably think about that later, though, because right now it is episode time. To begin, this is a quick disclaimer that even though I'm just an internet guy talking about some incredibly famous cultural and historical events with the expertise of a comedian, and it has certainly already been covered better and more thoroughly elsewhere, wrong facts will only ever be repeated accidentally and with the best intentions. Also, I don't usually do serial killers. That's one thing I wanted to say. That's more Mathis's thing. Yeah, as you'll soon see, this one is a little different. Nevertheless, graphic depictions of violence and cruelty lie ahead. Scoot the little ones out of the room for this one. And before I forget, you can bet that each one of us is going to display some serious insensitivity about these topics at one point or another throughout, so apologies for that in advance. We mean no harm, and just like always, more than anything, we promise we're working our hardest to try and put on the best show possible for all you kind folks out there listening.
That sounds scripted, dude. I don't know.
Maybe let the kid stay in on an episode, and if he starts looking like he's having too much fun, take him to a doctor.
Yeah.
It could be a warning sign. It could be like canary in the coal mine. Catch your serial killer early.
And speaking of catching your serial killer early, because you wouldn't be able to do, we wouldn't be able to do big giant episodes like this without listeners like you over at patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. We let one lucky fan write today's Patreon ad. That's right. In a new segment, we're calling the Patreon advertisement of the week. This one comes from somebody called, let's see here, Tarl Cabot. From somewhere near Vallejo, California. And now Jesse's going to read this for everybody right now.
Dear editor, I am the patron of that one subscription last Christmas at patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod and the one last 4th of July. To prove this, I shall state some facts which only the police know. Christmas, period. 1 access to Discord and ad-free episodes. I'm already committed. I realize now what Alex has done, but I'm already committed to the bit and I can't back out now.
We're in. I'm here for this ride.
2 bonus episode fired every time a new Chilluminati episode drops. 3 video episodes are great for watching on your back with feet to car. 4 unreleased episodes of Rotten Popcorn Pod, great for lying on right side, feet to west. 4th of July. One girl was wearing a new piece of Chilluminati merch. I don't like what this is. I don't like what's going on
it's
here.
getting a little weirder and weirder.
Every time we release one. 2 boy was also shot $10,000 to believe in ghosts or aliens. 3. Ammo was made by Western. Here is a cipher. The other parts are being mailed to other parts of the miniseries. I want these edited in by deed by Sat afternoon. If you do not include this cipher, I will go on a shill rampage. Sat night. This will last the whole weekend. I will cruise around shilling to people who are alone at night until why do I have to do this? Sunday night or until I shill to a dozen people.
You could be done with this if you hadn't made this very specific.
You know what? I'm aware. Then there's a symbol of some kind that I can't decipher, all caps, but I'd say it was wrought, all caps, by a true visionary, all caps. Now play close attention to this next part because it has to be exactly right. TYRSFVCTZYQDHIPGQIPDZOOZ. Oh, wait. Only one O. ZZZ.
Read that last part one more time for everybody.
Trixie, you want me to letter by or all one?
Yeah, just one time through again, just for everybody.
TYRSFVCTZYQDHIPDOZZZ.
Oops. And yep, sorry about that. I've just now received word in my earpiece that after several complaints, the Patreon advertainment of the week segment has now been canceled until further notice. And I guess I'll just keep doing all of the shilling myself. Anyway, now that that's all out of the way, come with me in your mind.
I was set up for failure and I don't like it.
Come with me in your mind. I'm serious. Like, close your eyes even while you listen to this. Use the dream techniques.
You think Alex is the Chilluminati? You think those people aren't real and he's actually
Dude, I'm
them?
starting to think you might be right. I don't think there is a most chill one.
I don't know about that.
I'm starting to get curious.
I feel like he's making it up.
I'm pretty sure I have the letters, so I'm getting the letters from somewhere.
Yeah. Not the AI.
Close your eyes. Use the dream techniques that we flirted with last time. Use them to literally try astral project yourself to the long stretches of the highway in an area of quiet, open Northern California. This place is called Cordelia. Okay, it's Cordelia. It is named after the wife of the clipper ship captain who founded it. And nowadays, it is not known for much more than a spot where two freeways meet on the road to Sacramento or Lake Tahoe. And it's also known for being haunted by a very particular type of ghost. Okay? And this is Mathis with a quote from an archived post in Archive X, which is an old online repository for ghost stories, which was by user Alex Breitler from like 2007 at the absolute latest. So here you go. Read this first, Mathis.
The Phantom of Cordelia. It is said that the ghost of a now probably dead mass murderer haunts the lonely roads in the area, tailgating women on moonless nights in his Chevy. Also, it is believed that on cold December nights, the killings are reenacted as they occurred so long ago. Nobody knows who the killer was, but many say they have seen that ghastly car on the roads, hunting for yet more victims. A stocky man is behind the wheel, glasses reflecting in oncoming headlights like snake eyes, and he is doomed to roam the deserted back roads of Solano County for all time. For it is on those same roads that he committed his worst atrocities. And if you are alone in that area late at night and you pick up a tail, maybe a white car, maybe flashing its high beams at you, whatever you do not stop.
Pretty interesting stuff. And really, if you think about ghosts as entities that stick around even after they're dead and gone because they have unfinished business, maybe that is exactly what the Zodiac, who this post is obviously about, maybe that's exactly what he is. Or maybe, to be more accurate than that, it is about the ghost of Zodiac. And maybe, if you have enough unfinished business, somebody like Zodiac can leave lots of different phantoms behind. I'm going to put quotes around phantoms, which when you make a splash into the cultural mindset as big as he did, even though no one knows who you are, nobody ever figured out who this was. So many different types of people have their own weird guess, and somehow it kind of makes sense all together. So this miniseries, Zodiac, the Great American Rabbit Hole, whose first chapter, which is called The Five Phantoms, we'll be diving into today, is based on my own experience during COVID when I was watching the movie Zodiac for the first time in a couple years. And I got fully swept up the mystery because I was like, I wonder, like the thought was like, what has happened since the movie ended? Because the movie's now like 15 years old. And I was totally gobsmacked by a pair of books that recently were published on the matter by a writer, journalist guy called Jarrett Kobek, a person I'd really love to interview if there's some way to contact this man. And the sort of stunning way he was able to recontextualize and refresh the whole vibe surrounding this case for me is pretty cool. However, first, for the sake of cultural, rather than just factual accuracy, which is a distinction that we can talk about further in due time, this story is going to be told in 3 separate parts. So today, starting today, in part 1, we're going to begin by discussing the Zodiac Killer as he exists in the zeitgeist now, like the popular image of this, like the popular story of the Zodiac Killer that everybody knows. We're going to like kind of dive deep into that story. We're going to use the, again, incredible David Fincher movie, which I think is like a masterpiece movie. It's just called Zodiac. And the book that inspired it, which is also called Zodiac, by Robert Graysmith, who was a cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle at one point, and became like a true crime writer, and is actually Jake Gyllenhaal's character in the movie. So this first part is where we're going to establish our basic timeline for these crimes, and just the entire Zodiac event, and go over the crimes
foundation, if you will.
Yeah, and we're going to go over the crimes as they happened according to popular understanding, and specifically without any of the knowledge of any further discoveries made in the case, since this sort of 1986 version of this, that's the main version that everybody knows, just sort of like crystallized for a while. Okay, so that's going to be like part 1. That's going to probably be this week and next week. And then once you're all experts, in part 2, we're going to cross-examine that story with the help of the first book that Jarrett Kobek wrote on the topic, which is called Motor Spirit, which is the book that he meant to write about this, as well as additional research, as Mathis said, undertaken by myself and our in-house researcher and like very good friend, Deanna, who I've now worked with now like 2 or 3 times.
Always a pleasure.
And as Mathis often says, she's completely indispensable. Shout out Deanna at Deanna Writes Inc. on Twitter, aka X, aka Living Digital Hell. Kobek's book is a particularly great read because not only does he write with like an ear for like good writing, like beautiful writing, but he also like revisits the timeline that Graysmith established, reframes it, takes all the information that was available, goes back to the police reports and the newspaper articles and the actual primary sources, starts with like no assumptions, fresh slate, and it recontextualizes a lot of stuff. And I think that the fact that he has this sort of like intuitive human thinking that Graysmith doesn't really have. Graysmith seems to kind of be writing more towards some kind of like, he kind of picked a suspect and kind of like wrapped his whole story around that. And he was maybe a little bit, because of that, was kind of willing to kind of like distort things a little bit more. That's later, because right now we need to learn that distorted version. So now it's time for part 1, which is called The Five Phantoms. It's mostly factual. I try to keep it, I'm not like going to lie to you straight up. I'm going to keep it as accurate as possible while telling you something close to the story that everybody knows already. So part 1, The Five Phantoms. Let's go right back to Northern California's back roads one more time. But this time, we're also going to be going 60 years back in time to December 20th, 1968. It's 11:15 p.m. at the Berryessa water pumping station in a small gravel turnout near gate number 10 on the Lake Herman Road, which is about 3.2 miles south of Columbus Parkway. And by the way, if you have never heard a single thing about Zodiac before, buckle your ass up, because this is about to be fucking wild, bro.
Yeah, if this is your intro, you're going to probably lose a month of your life just trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, this is your warning. Anyway, this little turnout by the pumping station was a popular lover's lane at the time because of its remoteness and because you could only you could only really fit like 3 or 4 cars in there without it getting overcrowded. So it's kind of like low key. So kind of, if you look at a picture of it, it's very small. It was also a popular meeting place for shady groups of teenagers, which is probably what Petit quiet little Stella Borges thought as she drove from her ranch down the road to pick up her grandson at Berryessa High School, and her headlights lit up the scene that she arrived at the turnout. At first, she saw the Rambler parked there with its door open and thought that the man lying on the ground was drunk and had fallen out of his car or something and gotten hurt. But then, closer to the road by the yellow street sign, she noticed the body of 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, who was a student at Hogan High School in Vallejo, California, who had been out on a date with the guy over by the car, who was a 17-year-old from Vallejo High School, nearby high school, called David Faraday. Earlier that night, around 8 p.m., David had picked up Betty Lou from her parents' house, allegedly to go see a Christmas concert at her school. However, that's pretty late for a concert. And what actually happens is they swing by their friend Sharon's house for an hour till like 9, and then headed over to this place, Mr. Ed's, after that to grab a soda. It's kind of like Happy Days vibes if you're trying to imagine it. But it's like the 60s, so it's a little after Happy Days vibes. According to 2 passing raccoon hunters who were driving past the turnout at around 9:30, unbeknownst to Betty Lou and David, there was already someone parked at their makeout spot in a car that looked like a Chevy Impala around 9:30. However, according to the person in that Chevy who was there, those people were chased away by a second car, which looked like a Plymouth Valiant that chases them for several miles after. They like chases them out of the parking lot and then follows them for several miles. And then like the guy like gives up or misses a turn or something. David and Betty Lou never see any of this. They get there 45 minutes later, 10:15. A couple people saw this car parked there alone. One witness named Peggy Yower said she saw them around 11 out in front of the car. So they were there for 45 minutes. They got out of the car at some point. 10 minutes later, a worker at Humble Oil sees them passing in a truck. And another car is also there, parked at the turnout with nobody outside of their cars. So that's at like 11:10. And then 5 minutes later, in comes Stella, who saw all the blood and who immediately drives off to find help. And thanks to that timeline, we know whatever violence happens here fits right in those 5 minutes between the oil man seeing them and Stella finding them. So this is a
Very
quick
brief moment.
A quick hit and run. To underline this point, when the police arrive moments later, the car is still running. All doors besides the front one are locked. This is a dark road, a rural road in California, if you know what that's like. It's probably the only lights in the area are these headlights. All doors besides the front door are locked. There's a .22 caliber shell casing on the floor of the passenger side of the car. One ricochet mark on the inside ceiling. There's a bullet hole in the left rear wheel housing, and the rear right window is shattered. They find 8 more casings at the scene, 7 slugs, and around the car, going around it on the passenger side, they found very, very light footprints, and then like one other pretty deep footprint, but it was on the other side of a locked gate, so like probably not involved. The bullets themselves are thought to be from a .22 caliber J.C. Higgins Model 80 or High Standard Model 101, which, if you look them up, are very like Luger-y looking guns, with Super X copper-coated long rifle ammo made by Winchester. Betty Lou is facing the road, 5 bullet wounds in her back, as if she was killed running towards the road, probably trying to flag down help or something. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Faraday is on the ground by the car, face down. He almost opened the door and fell out of it with a single gunshot wound to the back of his head, a lump on his right cheek, powder burns behind his left ear. He was still breathing when he left the scene in an ambulance, but he was pronounced dead at the hospital 5 minutes after midnight on December 21st, the next day. That's pretty much all there is to say about this part of the case for now, since taken on its own, even though this is likely the first in a series of sensationalized crimes. At the time, it didn't really seem that different from your average senseless act of violence, maybe a jealous boyfriend or whatever. But just to give you an idea of the vibe at the time, here's a quote from Gray Smith's book for Jesse to read. I'm going to just drop that in the chat for you right now.
The victim's last day was exactingly reconstructed minute by minute. 34 detailed statements were taken. The family and friends of Betty Lou and David were questioned, as well as the routine local suspects. Among other possibilities, there were 290 registrants from Napa State Hospital for the insane living in the area. From Betty Lou's family, the police learned that there was a lovesick boy who had been bugging her at school and who had threatened David. "I'm thinking about using brass knuckles on you." They also suspected this boy might have been the one prowling about the yard at night. The police passed this information on to an investigator who discovered the suspect had an airtight alibi. After his sister's birthday party, the boy watched Global Affair on TV until 11 in the company of a Mare Island policeman. Leads from the public were followed up, but there seemed to be no motive to the brutal slayings outside of killing for the sheer joy of it. The police could find no attempt at robbery or sexual molestation of the victims. Perhaps the killing itself had served as a sexual release for the murderer.
Later, of course, we find that this killer had much bigger things in mind. And from now on is when we get into the kind of like much more canonized part of the Zodiac story. Like the first murder that we just talked about is not in the movie at all, just referenced. The movie actually starts with this one. This one is the one that has lots and lots of details and stuff many of you out there may already know or at least familiar with thanks to the movie. Again, we're going to lay these out as faithfully to popular understanding as possible before we start dismantling, questioning everything. Because I think for the new info to really hit, you kind of need to be familiar with what the popular thinking on it is out there in the world. Because kind of like JFK or whatever, a lot of people care about it and have their pet theories about it, and things have become kind of like politicized around it in the world of internet sleuthing. So I kind of want to like arm you with some foreknowledge.
What does that mean exactly?
Just like there's like a lot of like toxicity and stuff out there amongst investigators of this who are like on the R Zodiac killer subreddit and stuff. They, certain people feel about one theory. It's like a fandom versus another.
Like the console wars of true
It's
crime.
exactly the same vibe as like
gatekeeping of the Zodiac killer.
Yeah, no joke. It's like exactly the same thing as like people arguing about like Stephen Moffat versus Chris Chibnall versus
people still think the Menendez brothers are innocent. There's always like people on other sides.
Okay, all right, it's interesting. I don't know why there'd be like, this is incorrect facts. What you're saying here.
What you're talking about right now, like the incredulity that you're showing right now is like exactly like if I was like a journalist pitching this to a newspaper, that's like the angle that we're going with.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just people, it's like politicized, like I say. So to me, having this in your bat belt or whatever, this version, even though it's not fully accurate 100%, it's kind of like neutral ground. Like, as weird as that is, like knowing this story kind of like arms you to have a conversation. So that's why I'm doing this. Anyway, almost 8 months pass after that first crime. And now back in imaginary old-timey Northern California, it is now midnight between July 4th and July 5th, 1969, literally midnight, in the parking lot of the Blue Rock Springs golf course. Still a very quiet, remote place to be at that time of night. Only a couple of miles away from the Lake Herman Road turnout where Betty, Lou, and David were shot last Christmas. Just a couple miles. Now, in the days before the internet, one thing that teenagers used to do, and which in my heart I wish some people still do today, and just I hope somebody's doing this, because other than getting murdered or like profiled by the cops or whatever's going to happen while you're out, this is an awesome thing to do. Pile into a car, cruise around town for shits and giggles, parking in private places to do private things, cultivate a budding sense of independence for yourself as a youth, learn how to, be out, go be a human.
Right, but have you heard of chat rooms?
They're fine, but you don't go anywhere. They're fine, but you don't go anywhere.
I'm pretty sure that's the point.
I know.
Because if you don't go anywhere, you can't be brutally murdered by like a dude in the middle of the night.
Odds are you're going to make it. But that's kind of part of the lesson. That's kind of part of the lesson.
You're going to make it.
To be fair, Jesse,
it's true.
You could be talking to somebody who will murder you in the chat room.
That never happens.
Yeah, I bet you I'm never
ASL is always legit, dude.
That's true. It's
every
the same thing.
time.
Always.
It's the same law that cops have to tell you they're cops.
Yeah, you have to tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And wouldn't you know it, cruising is exactly what Deborah, Roger, and Jerry were doing up late after all the 4th of July festivities, and they were pulling into the Blue Rock Springs lot because since it, too, was a popular place for kids to go to be alone, they thought it might be a good place to find Roger's friend, since they did not yet have cell phones at this time in history, and since she was a teenager just like them, they figured the best way to see if she was there was to just literally get in the car, all of them, drive to where they thought she may be, and see if she was there. Isn't that crazy? Unfortunately, what they find isn't their mysterious friend, but another unlucky couple who ran into some evil out on the road that night and got shot up for it. 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin, who lives in Vallejo and works at Terry's Waffle Shop in town, is slumped over the steering wheel in the front seat of the car, while 19-year-old Mike Majot, who regularly fought with his twin brother Steven for Darlene's affection and talked to her on the phone at home almost twice a day, is on the ground in front of the car, covered in blood and writhing in pain. The three teenagers, who are not even suspicious enough to be asked their last names by the cops, apparently, are too scared to stay away. They don't want to stay because they think maybe like the guys who got Mike and Darlene are like around. So they all get together back in the car and they go get the police because they're afraid. So months earlier, back on February 26th, and again, remember, this is the midnight of after 4th of July. Back on February 26th, Darlene, who I should mention lives and has a daughter with her current husband, Dean Ferrin, in a house on Wallace Street in Vallejo, was working at the waffle shop while her babysitter, Karen, looked after her daughter, Dina, at home. And funnily enough, that Karen eventually grew up into a real kid. I'm just kidding. Just the right time. Just the right time period. Anyway, apparently, Karen notices that some weird man seems to be staking out the house that day, February 26th. But according to Karen, when she brings it up to Darlene, Darlene kind of laughs it off, makes an offhand remark that it's fine. And she says something like, it's only because she says something like, it's only because I saw him kill somebody once. Don't worry about it. And she was like, what the fuck? It's not even clear whether she was being serious or what with that remark.
Yeah, still.
A little more about Darlene, since it's starting to seem a little weird maybe, is that she used to be called Darlene Suennen. And even though she's only 22 at the time of her murder, she already had one marriage with a guy named Jim, who she may have spent some time beach bumming her way around the Virgin Islands with and like seeing some shit. She seems to have lived several little lives all over the country before finally landing back in Vallejo. And though I don't want to like pour fuel on the like she's a hoe fire, because I don't think that's what this is, I do know and want to just acknowledge that she kind of had a less conventional relationship with men in her life. And while she was married and dating two twin brothers, allegedly among others, including several cops, she really was just like a bright light of a girl who loved a good time, seemingly in all things, fully had the blessing, or whatever passed as the blessing in 1969 of her husband, Dean, who also worked at a restaurant in town called Caesars, by the way. Dean did not have anything bad to say about Darlene at all. So I'm just taking my Robert Graysmith mask off for a second to just say, please don't jump to conclusions about her. Nothing really like, nobody's like, she's a hoe. Like literally no one in this story who knew her says anything like that.
I just want to point out again, reminder, if this was John Smith doing the exact same things, we would not be having discussion of if someone's a hoe. So just putting that out
There's nice, good people everywhere if you're a little more open-minded. Anyway, a month after Karen sees Darlene's casual murder stalker guy person, February 26th, this is a month later, Darlene's sister Pam notices a guy. She has a big family. Darlene's sister Pam notices a guy leaving packages on Darlene's porch one at a time over the day on March 15th. The third time he comes to drop off a package, she meets him at the door to grab it, and he gives it to her. But he says not to open any of the packages, which is like a weird thing to say. Though apparently one of these packages, according to some sources, did end up containing some of the floral fabric she eventually made into the dress she was wearing that night that she was killed. So that's a weird coincidence. I don't know if that's relevant, but this weird guy dropped off this package, and in that package was the material that she used to make the dress that she was wearing when she was killed.
So the implication is like, make this dress, wear this dress, I'm going to kill you in this dress. Is like his vibe is what you're saying?
Part of the problem with this book is that like, there's a lot of stuff like this in here where it's like, I'm not going to, just throwing it out there. It's weird.
It's like, even more complicated. Like it was more ritualistic.
He doesn't like draw any sort of conclusion from this. Like there's a little bit of threads that he like spins out of it to like kind of suggest things maybe about this guy.
He nudges you in a particular direction.
Sometimes about certain things, but a lot of the stuff is just kind of vague and kind of like just, I feel like it's there to make you paranoid. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cause it doesn't really all stack up to anything, I don't know.
And that's part of like the mythification of like serial killers that some authors do.
Absolutely. So that happens
Not just
in
authors,
March.
podcasters,
Yeah, exactly.
YouTubers.
Certainly.
Media.
Anyway, after March 15th, almost 2 months later on May 9th, Darlene and Dean move from their house on Wallace Street to a new house on Virginia Street. And a few weeks later, on the 24th of May, Darlene has a painting party at her new house with a bunch of friends, some of which are actually local Vallejo cops. But one of the ones who's not a cop is a memorable, strange character who several people call Paul without a last name, and who Darlene's sister Linda remembers Darlene warning her to stay away from. Stay away from Paul. That's what Darlene told Linda. 1 month later, after that, on June 22nd, Linda, one of Darlene's sisters, is at Terry's Waffle Shop and sees Darlene being bothered by someone while she's working, though she's not sure who it is. 2 days later, Darlene tells her an even younger sister called Christina that some big things are going to be happening soon, but that she can't tell her what, and that she's going to have to read about it in the newspaper, but she doesn't want to say what it is. And now we've caught up to the day of the murder, July 4th. At 6:30 p.m., Dean's boss at Caesars says Darlene and her youngest sister, Christina, came into Caesars to see Dean on their way to a 4th of July boat parade at nearby Mare Island, where there's a huge naval shipyard. So they wanted to go see like a 4th of July boat deal down there. Dean says he gets off at 10, wants to have a party at home after work with a couple friends, like kickback vibes. So Darlene says she's in and that she'll grab the fireworks on the way home, yada, yada, yada. 15 minutes later, she stops by the waffle shop to tell her friend Bobby about the party, and then she heads out. So now we're like close to 7 p.m. At 8 o'clock, she calls Mike to make a plan to see him later, Mike Majot, her boyfriend. At 10:15, she calls the babysitter, who isn't Karen this time, but another babysitter called Janet, to check in on her daughter. Janet says that someone's been calling the house asking for Darlene. 15 minutes later, at 10:30, she returns to the waffle shop with Christina, who notices that someone in the restaurant is watching Darlene, but for some reason she doesn't want to worry Darlene and doesn't tell her about it. After that, Darlene drives home with Christina, but after taking a phone call in the other room, she comes back out and asks Janet if she can stay till 12:15 because she still needs to get the fireworks. So that's a weird thing that happens. But now we're after midnight on the babysitter. And she heads out at 11:55 and goes and picks up Mike Majot at his house. And he's so excited that he leaves without turning off the light or the TV or shutting the door to his house, which maybe was just chill to do at that time. I'm not sure. Maybe they just felt safe doing that, but that's the vibe. And they were allegedly briefly and scarily followed by someone who was parked under a tree just outside Mike's house before speeding up, taking turns, losing the tail. Well, that's another thing that happened that night. And after driving a bit more to make sure that he was gone, Darlene, who was the driver, nervously turned into the Blue Rock Springs lot. Maybe they were already headed there. Graysmith in the book says he thinks they were being, quote, herded there. Don't know. It's kind of a bold claim to make.
Again, yeah, it's another one of those nudging you in a direction.
Either way, according to Mike at this point, a car pulls up next to them, parks off to their left, makes them nervous because the guy's just kind of like robo style, before speeding off seconds later. And that kind of like chills them out first. But then 5 minutes later, the fear becomes creeping back because they realize the car that left earlier now has pulled up right behind them, or some car has pulled up right behind them, cutting off their escape route. And the driver has a flashlight that is so bright that they can't like see really. Like it's a bright light behind them in the car. In fact, the light makes them so nervous. They actually got their IDs out because the way the car pulled up and blasted on them like that, they thought it might be the cops. Legit. Mike rolls down the window to speak to somebody he believes to be a police officer, and immediately he's shot in the face, which shreds his jaw and his tongue. And then this dude who shoots him in the face just keeps shooting. And some of the bullets that are hitting Mike are also going through Mike's body and into Darlene's body. And eventually Mike stretches his body up in pain and kind of tries to get away from it and goes over the seat and lands in the back seat on the ground. And after this, the shooter thinks he's done and goes to leave, but Mike is like, ah! He comes online and starts feeling pain. So the shooter comes back, shoots each of them 2 more times, before getting in his car and driving away. At some point, Mike says one of them tries flagging down help by flashing the headlights. But to give you an idea of how fucked up he was, he couldn't even remember if it was him or Darlene who did that.
Yeah. Your
also,
brain is at that point just fucking firing every chemical to keep you alive.
Yeah. Also, according to him, the door handle was missing when he tried to get out of the car, and he ends up having to wriggle out the window to get out of the car. Though strangely, when the car is brought in later for analysis, the handle is seemingly replaced, which is something that Graysmith puts in there to make you think that like the cops could be involved somehow. He doesn't straight up say it. He just kind of like is like, she was having sex with cops and there's cops. It's just weird. Rather than assuming that maybe a guy with actual brain damage remembering something wrong could happen, like maybe there was
a
handle
traumatized
and just
mind just misremembering
for nothing, and his brain didn't recognize the handle, or just grabbed a part of the door that he was unfamiliar with. I don't know. Anyway, when the real police arrive, it's one of the guys from the painting party responding to a call about gunshots. But considering it's the 4th of July, he's thinking it's going to be some like firecrackers that are being reported as gunshots. He's wrong about that. Somehow both Darlene and Mike are still alive when they show up, but they're in a bad way. There's lots of blood everywhere, and they do not seem to be doing like very good at all. They're running out of time. The car has both windows rolled down. The engine is running. The radio is on, and the car is in low with no handbrake on. And there are 11 shell casings found at the scene. Darlene has been shot 9 times, twice in each arm, 5 in her right side, piercing her lung and left ventricle. Mike has 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in his knee, 1 in his hip, 1 in his neck, and 1 that went through the left cheek and out the right that shredded his mouth up. And you can look at him in an interview in 2007, and he's still fucked up. I think he's dead now, but at the time, there's a documentary online that's called "This Is the Zodiac Speaking." That's like all like primary sources, not primary, but like people who were there. Well, I guess primary, but they're talking about after the fact. Darlene was witnessed by an officer on the scene trying to speak, but she couldn't breathe because her lungs were too punctured and she was making no sound. And she's pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, 12:38 a.m. But miraculously, Mike actually pulls through, though, like I said, not without life-altering injuries, both mental and physical, that stay with him for the rest of his life. 2 minutes later, after they get it to the hospital at 12:38, at 12:40, from a payphone near Joe's Union on Springs Road in town, which is less than half a mile away from Dean and Darlene's house. Don't know. Yeah, came from a man whose calm, collected voice and long, taunting pronunciation of goodbye scared the shit out of police dispatcher Nancy Slover. And here's Mathis with a dramatic reading of the transcript.
I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
They traced the call and tried to ring back, which got them a physical description when someone saw him take the receiver back off the hook. But by the time they got there, all they found was a receiver hanging off the hook. Here, Graysmith takes a moment in his version of the story to let everything breathe for a minute. Like a moment in a sci-fi movie when the scientists realize the AI is like smarter than they realize and it's going to kill them or something. We're
on their way there in real life.
Yeah, and then he lets the terror and the implications and the question of the not Zodiac himself sink in. The moment is admittedly quite dramatic. They find Mike's house empty, just how they left it, with the door open and the TV blaring and the lights on. Then the 4th of July kickback that's still going at Dean and Darlene's house long after they're dead gets a 1:30 a.m. call with heavy breathing on the other end of the line, hours before the crime is reported to the public. They didn't know she was dead. They thought it was one of Darlene's boyfriends trying not to get caught by her husband. That's why he was not talking. A few minutes later, Dean's parents get the same call. Then Dean's brother. Darlene's parents had an unlisted number and did not get a call. Just saying. The police investigates plenty of suspects, but it never really goes anywhere. Mike moved into a second-floor apartment he called his hideout, dyed his hair red, only left the house when his dad would drive him back and forth for treatment of his injuries, which some people actually use as evidence in saying that he knew the killer. But again, Graysmith just kind of wilding. And here, folks, we meet the first of our 5 phantoms of Zodiac. This version is the not Zodiac. No name, no character, just the guy who the police think did these 2 crimes. He could be a bartender. He could be a boyfriend. He could be a desperate drug dealer. There is no romance, no mystery yet. Just an anonymous local triple murderer made a really scary phone call who the cops are slowly developing a suspect for based on descriptions by a bunch of people related to the victims who maybe knew the guy thanks to the shaky circumstantial theory that the killer knew his victim. This guy's not a super genius yet. He's not a weird folk hero, evil folk hero. He's not a comic book villain. But still, even this early on, nevertheless, he seems to be someone who's clearly finding a certain amount of enjoyment or at least amusement in his work, based solely, one, on the weird goodbye, the slightly flirtatious idea that he would call in his own crimes in the first place, and even the cockiness to assume it was a double murder that night when one of his victims totally lived. It's like first contact with a predator above you on the food chain. It's probably why it freaked out that dispatcher so much. It was like talking to a monster, like legit. From Karen, the babysitter, who told Darlene there was a man watching her house, we can imagine a man with wavy, dark brown hair and the round face of someone heavyset and sort of middle-aged. From Darlene's sister Pam, we know this guy also had horn-rimmed glasses. She was the one who received the packages from this guy. Though again, in 1969, it was not like horn-rimmed glasses are not like a bold, charming, memorable fashion choice. This is like everybody's fucking glasses were that. You know what I mean? Didn't look weird, but he had them, and they're just kind of like, he kind of looked the same in those two descriptions. Coincidentally, Darlene's sister said that mysterious Paul guy that I mentioned from the party, the painting party, also wore horn-rimmed glasses. And wouldn't you know it, he too was an older guy with wavy hair who was roughly 5'8". Mike Mageau, however, with a light in his face and bullets flying into his body and a hole in his face, he still described a heavyset man, but said he was younger. And slowly, the first phantom comes into focus, congeals into a single, mysterious, let's still completely mundane shape. Some things are certain. Some things, no matter how you try to explain them, still seem strangely out of place about this case. Here's another one of these Graysmith zingers. For example, why on earth was Mike Mageau discovered to have been wearing, and this is verifiable, why was Mike Mageau discovered to have been wearing 3 complete sets of clothes that night? Despite it being 4th of July in California. 3 full layers of all his clothes. Checking the records outside of the book, I just checked it myself. Even at the time of the attack, late at night, it was still about 60 degrees out, or 15.5 degrees if you are a Celsius tribesman, with almost no wind that night, which to me, I could wear shirt and shorts and slippers in that weather. Like, I wouldn't be 100% comfortable, but it is not like multiple layers of clothing weather. 60 degrees is not
We
cold.
do live in LA, and I will say that there's sometimes during midday, it's like 60, and you'll see people in a parka.
Fine, but no wind. They're in a car. Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem right.
I mean, you're not wrong. It seems weird. But
he's hinting that maybe he knew he was going to be attacked. That's what the hint is.
Oh, the hint is that he put those layers on, so if he was stabbed or something, or whatever.
He's like layered up. Oh, okay.
But he doesn't straight up say it. He just kind of hints it.
It leaves you in that direction.
Yeah. Which is probably why I'll keep on saying the same thing. There's always something that doesn't fit. Always. And speaking of which, before the story takes its first huge left turn, let's get even more disoriented by skipping ahead for a moment to Sunday, August 3rd, 1969, almost 125 miles south of Vallejo, in another slightly famous NorCal town, familiar to fans of the author John Steinbeck, Salinas, California. There in Salinas, a 41-year-old history and economics teacher at North Salinas High School called Donald Gene Hardin was having a lazy Sunday with his wife when he noticed a strange set of ciphers in the newspaper. Having had an interest in cryptography back in college, he busted out a copy of his old code-breaking book, Secret and Urgent, by somebody called Fletcher Pratt. Got to work for 3 hours without making too much progress beyond deciding it was a substitution cipher, which is one of those ones where the alphabet is replaced by various symbols, even though it seemed too complex for a simple 1-1 transposition. Probably something a little bit more complicated than that. After that, Donald's wife, Betty June, who's an amateur writer and poet herself, joined him. They worked on it until bed, woke up, kept going till Monday morning. And according to the original story, it was around then that Betty made her breakthrough of identifying 2 cribs in the message, which are cribs are words that she believed were hidden in there in specific positions in the ciphertext. It's like guessing what word you think it is, kind of, to try and help you work backwards to solve it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, yeah. So in the case of this cipher, she imagined that the author would be vain for some reason, we'll get into in a minute, and start their message with the word I. And next, for reasons that will become clear in a moment, she guessed she'd find the word kill, or even a combo of both cribs, like I like killing, which she fucking did find. And after a few hours of working backwards from this, they had their solution, and the Hardens would forever be enshrined in the history of this story as the people who helped reveal our killer's motivation, which was seemingly much more sinister than anybody might have thought. Here's Jesse with the transcription from their worksheet for the solution, complete with all kinds of weird grammar and spelling errors, which he loves, and which you'll soon see are kind of a theme with this guy.
I would love to know what her, like, yeah, it says kill. Like, what was going on? Or besides,
You'll see why. You'll see why. But let's read the solution first. Here we go.
I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. Oh, no period. Most dangerous animal of all, assumed period. Yeah. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of Slavs for my afterlife.
Dude loves Slavs.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah.
After that, the message is followed by a jumbled string of extra letters, which are now thought to be garbage left over from the encryption process. But at the time, people were trying to unscramble them into someone's name. Without an implied endorsement, my two favorites were Timothy E. Fibberty, which you really have to see spelled out to enjoy, which I'll drop that in the chat for you now. It'll give you a laugh.
That's a cousin of Black Agar Boltigan.
Yeah, Timothy E. Fibberty is an Inhuman.
Timothy E. Fibberty.
And then Robert Emmett, the hippie, which straight up adds 3 extra letters that aren't in the ciphertext. And funnily enough, non-starters, both of those. Those never led anywhere, surprisingly. But now, let's go back a couple days to see exactly what got everybody so excited about this cipher in the first place. On August 1st, 1969, almost a month after the attack on Darlene and Mike, 3 relatively local newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received a specially written copy of the same basic letter. It wasn't signed with a name. It was signed with a symbol, which was a simple crosshair over the center of a circle with a crosshair on it. Here's Mathis with the version of that letter that was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, since that's where Robert Graysmith, who was working at the time, he was working there. He enters our story at this point when the letter shows up. He was there. And he becomes kind of a character in the action sometimes here on out, especially in the movie version. And seriously, if I haven't convinced you to watch Zodiac yet, let me just say again, you should watch Zodiac, though maybe you should wait till after you hear next week's episode to watch it, because otherwise it'll kind of spoil it for you. Though really, this all kind of actually happened in real life too, so like, are we really spoiling it? I don't know. Let's not go too far down the rabbit hole with that. Here you go, Mathis. Let me give you this. Sorry that this letter sounds extremely familiar.
Dear editor, I'm not doing Jesse's voice.
Probably a good call.
This is the murder of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know. Christmas, brand name of ammo, Super X, 10 shots were fired. The boy was on his back with his feet to the car. The girl was on her right side, feet to the west. 4th July. Girl was wearing patterned slacks. The boy was also shot in the knee. Brand name of ammo was Western. Here's the part of a cipher. The other 2 parts of this cipher are being mailed to the editors of the Vallejo Times and SF Examiner. I want you to print this cipher on the front page of your paper. In this cipher is my identity. If you do not print this cipher by the afternoon of Friday, the 1st of August 69, I will go on a killing rampage Friday night. I will cruise around all weekend, killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again until I end up with a dozen people over the weekend.
And then for you two, here's a link to images of these actual letters and ciphers. I'm sure most of you listening have seen at least one of these before. If not, they're easily available if you look for the Z408 cipher or just the specific letter, the Zodiac letter from August 1st, 1969. Otherwise, let these two describe it to you. Just go ahead and click through there. You can see it.
Yeah. So first off, he is ending these letters with
that symbol.
a symbol that is like a crosshair.
Yeah.
And then the cipher it looks like compared to the rest of the letter, much better writing, if that makes any sense.
Like neater, yeah.
Yeah, and it is a mixture of letters, symbols, and letters that are backwards.
A lot of them are like kind of like occulty looking symbols. It's all done, I would say like black felt pen, or actually I think it's blue felt pen in color. This is just a Xerox, but I think it's blue felt pen. Felt tip pen. And by August 3rd, even though it was late, not every paper put on the front page. All three papers have basically complied with the letter writer's demands. And everything he asked to be printed actually shows up, which is exactly how Don and Betty were able to solve the cipher so fast. But also because pretty much all the info he gave about the murders could be taken from various news reports on the crimes, Vallejo Police Chief Jack E. Stilts issues a statement asking for more information that might eliminate any doubt that this was really the killer they were communicating with and not just some weirdo. And by the way, just wanted to point out that he did not give his name in that cipher, even though he said he would. Don't know what that says about him. Nevertheless, amazingly, even though the cipher isn't reported,
you know what it says about him? It says about what says every serial killer. They're cowards.
Yeah, chicken shit.
They're just chicken shit little fucking measly nobodies who desperately want to mean something, so kill other people because it's all they can do.
Amazingly, though, even though this cipher is not reported solved till like almost 2 weeks later on the 12th, he answers the chief's request for more info almost immediately with a letter 1 day later on the 4th of August. Except this time there's no cipher. Instead, he just gives us something to call him. This is a pretty important letter. And Jesse, I'll have you read this letter now.
Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. In answer to your asking for more details about the good times I have had in Vallejo, I shall be very happy to supply even more material. By the way, are the police having a good time with the code? If not, tell them to cheer up. When they do crack it, they will have me. On the 4th of July, I did not open the car door. The window was rolled down already. The boy was originally sitting in the front seat when I began firing. When I fired, the first shot was at his head. He leaped backwards at the same time, thus spoiling my aim. He ended up in the back seat, then the floor and the back, thrashing out very violently with his legs. That's how I shot him in the knee. I did not leave the scene of the killing with squealing tires and racing engine as described in the Vallejo paper. I drove away quite slowly, so as not to draw attention to my car. The man who told the police that my car was brown as a Negro, about 40 to 45, rather shabbily dressed. What? The man who told the police that my car was brown. Oh, the man who told my police that my car was brown was a Negro, 45, so he's ratting this dude out.
Yeah.
I was at this phone booth having some fun with the Vallejo cops when he was walking by. When I hung up the phone, hung the damn phone up thing, right? Sure. When I hung the phone up, the damn thing began to ring, and that drew his attention to me in my car.
In Jesse's defense, the Zodiac is one of those guys who loves to like spell things badly on purpose.
Scene was spelled C-E-N-E.
Yeah, just to give you an idea.
There's a ton of misspellings in all of these things.
Last Christmas, 2 S's. In that episode, the police were wondering as to how I could shoot and hit my victims in the dark. They did not openly state this, but implied this by saying it was a well-lit night and I could see the silhouettes on the horizon. Bullshit. That area is surrounded by high hills and trees. What I did was tape a small pencil flashlight to the barrel of my gun. If you notice, in the center of the beam of light, if you train it at a wall or ceiling, you will see a black or dark spot in the center of the circle of light about 3 to 6 inches across. When taped to a gun barrel, the bullet will strike exactly in the center of the black dot of the light. All I had to do was spray them as if it was a water hose. There is no need to use the gun sights. I was not happy to see that I did not get front page coverage.
And here's for you guys. Here's pictures of the real thing, so you guys can see it. Also available at zodiackiller.com if you want to check them out.
Classic.
And now, at this point, now that we have this letter situation going, the second phantom emerges. The real, actual Zodiac entity that this killer believes himself to be. Not just a crime suspect that the police are looking for, but this is his image of himself as a criminal. After seemingly carrying out his crimes scot-free, getting somewhat front page attention in several major newspapers, and even giving himself like a nom de guerre. In my opinion, this version of the Zodiac is the closest the world's come ever to an actual Batman-style comic book villain. And the reason that he's never been caught suddenly becomes much more clear when you realize that after this first month as the not Zodiac, the effect this second version has, the second quote-unquote phantom had on the national psyche, made it impossible to carry out an impartial investigation into these crimes ever again. They had like a month to like do this like any other crime, and then anything useful is lost in a sea of tips, crazy people, other violent crimes that are like sometimes conscious of this other crime, confirmation bias, people's vanity, all kinds of stuff. It's like literally like when you think about the movie The Batman and how they based Paul Dano's version of the Riddler on Zodiac a lot, somewhat.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense. I'm not even sure that the Riddler style archetype existed before the Zodiac. It's like almost like the Riddler is Zodiac. Almost. I don't think that matches up, but
no, I feel
it's
like Riddler
close.
was probably early. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know.
1948 Riddler.
Yeah, so Riddler's a little before, but
yeah.
This is a real type of serial killer now. This guy who like leaves clues, right? This is the Zodiac thing that he created. For a second there, this guy really did have Gotham City in his clutches. Personally, I think he was really feeling himself too because of the bizarre way that this next situation goes down. This is, I think, where he was feeling himself the hardest. On September 27th, 1969, we're still in the same year, a couple months later, 39-year-old man from San Francisco called Ronald Henry Fong was out fishing with his son in a beautiful cove at a man-made reservoir about 45 miles north of Vallejo. It's built in the 50s and is known to locals as Lake Berryessa. As the sun was getting low, a little after 5 o'clock p.m., Ronald thought he was maybe hearing someone yelling from outside the cove, but he didn't take too much stock in it because people are making noise all the time at parks. But after about 10 or 15 minutes, he thinks maybe it's real, and he decides to take his boat over there and check it out. What he finds, his boat slowly going up the coast, he finds a 20-year-old Pacific Union college student named Brian Hartnell, one of the tallest people he's ever seen. Handsome, strapping, thick black glasses, doubled over and bloody on the shore of the lake, waving his arms around, legitimately screaming for help, saying something like he was attacked and robbed. Nearby, 22-year-old Cecilia Ann Shepard, she's a student in the process of moving over to Union College at Riverside, further south below LA, like closer to San Diego, who was quickly losing strength as she tried to yell too. Immediately, Ronald fired up his engine and headed to a nearby resort to contact the authorities and get help. But that doesn't come for a while. Earlier that day, these two students, Brian and Cecilia, are meeting up to help pack up some of Cecilia's stuff for her to bring down to her new school in Riverside. And since they kind of used to date, kind of were still into each other, but they're like going to two different schools now, they decided to make a day of it, catch up, maybe, I don't know. At first, they thought about going to San Francisco. They decided on going to Lake Berryessa last minute because it's way closer, give them more time together. Here's some pictures of it from the time so you can tell the people what it looks like. And by the way, again, ZodiacKillerFacts.com is another great website for stuff. But here's the Lake Berryessa like gallery you can kind of look at, see the overhead. You can see it's man-made. You can see how it looks kind of golf coursey.
Yeah.
But if you've seen the movie, it's very accurate.
These photos are so incredibly 1950s, 1960s.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Just everything about them.
God,
it looks like a Western, like TV program, like overhead shot. But I mean, it's golf coursey. It's kind of like everything's like round land masses. I don't know. It's kind of Orbis. Looks like Super Nintendo somehow. I don't know how to quantify that better.
And I mean, sure.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know. You'll figure it out. Go to ZodiacKillerFacts.com and check out the gallery. Even before they get there, an unassuming Chevy sedan was seen lurking at the lake. By 4 p.m., Brian and Cecilia are parked nearby and walking the quarter mile down to a nice little peninsula with a tree on the end, which I think you can see in one of those pictures is the shady 2 trees there. It's like at the end of a peninsula that's like a little further into the water. So much so that sometimes in the summer it even becomes an island from time to time. But unfortunately, not today. After about an hour of being there, at 5 p.m., a dentist and his son, who are also at the park, notice a solitary man near this area, heavy set, roughly 5 foot 10 inches, who quickly moves out of sight when seen. And then a little after that, Cecilia notices a man approaching from the trees before he ducks behind one like a cartoon. She tells Brian about it, but Brian thinks she's talking about different trees that are much farther away. And he's very surprised when a few seconds later, he's right on top of the couple, walking fast, and he has a pistol. Hartnell is not good at gauging height because, like I said, he's very tall. He's 6'7". So he's always looking down on people, so it's hard for him to tell how tall they are. But he says this guy's between 5'10 and 6'2", between 225, 250, somewhere in there, pounds-wise. And aside from the gun, which was most likely a Colt 1911, that like classic handgun, based on descriptions. You guys know what that is, right?
Yeah,
sure.
I always have the thought, if I had to describe somebody to the cops, I feel like I would fuck it up. I feel like I have an inability to judge someone's height and weight with any accuracy, and that the person I describe would not be anywhere near the person that like assaulted.
What if I told you there are entire podcasts just about that?
That doesn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
So in addition to this gun, he also had a large amount of thick white plastic clothesline and a wooden sheath hanging from his belt, which contained a large bayonet or bread knife, 3/4 to 1 inch wide and about a foot long. So we're talking about a big fucking like medieval cooking knife, like a big ass knife. It had brass rivets, white surgical cotton tape around the hardwood handle, like medical style cotton tape around the hardwood handle. Guy was wearing a blue/black dark windbreaker over some kind of red or black wool shirt, black gloves, which he tucked his sleeves completely inside of, and baggy dark slacks with pleats that were tucked into heavy boots. Okay. On top of this is the part that everybody remembers. Over his head, he wears a strange black hood with a flat top, like a bag, like a paper bag upside down, that had 4 square corners. Which hung all the way down below his shoulder and over his chest, like down below his nipples. He cut slits in the hood for eyes, which he covered with like the clip-on front of some sunglasses. And in the center of his chest, sewn on like a knight's insignia, was a big 4-inch wide white version of the crosshair symbol that was at the bottom of every Zodiac letter. It looked like it came from a costume shop or like a novelty store. Like it was fairly professionally made, sewn. Just visible through the eye slits was a greasy forehead and the suggestion of dark hair. And here is a composite of both the man that the dentist and his son saw, who was not wearing this hood, as well as the guy in the hood as described by Brian Hartnell. You can pull it up and look at it. I mean,
it's like when Spider-Man was in the Fantastic Four outfit and wearing a paper bag over his head.
It looks, if you've seen the movie, this is like probably the most memorable scene in the entire movie. But he's kind of iconic. Robert Graysmith is a cartoonist, and he drew a version of it that like I still see everywhere on like stickers that kind of looks like comic book art. I'm sure you've seen that one.
Maybe
if you've ever like seen a picture of the Zodiac Killer that's not a composite drawing, this is the drawing you've seen. I left in the composite drawings because those are based off the testimony and are a little bit more accurate. Like in the movie, he looks like he's wearing like an all black suit almost, but he's actually wearing like this thing over a windbreaker and some slacks, and he just tucked it in weird to make it look weird. The man says that he recently killed a man while escaping prison in Montana, and that he's not looking to hurt anybody as long as he can get some money and swap out his stolen car for a new one. Brian says he only has 75 cents, but the man is welcome to it, he says, and he's also willing to write him a check or offer any legal assistance, or at least whatever assistance he can provide as a pre-law student, right? None of that really matters to the guy, though.
Sure.
And eventually, he just has Brian lie down on his stomach and makes Cecilia tie him up with the hollow plastic clothesline. which he does loosely to try and give him an easy way out. Then the man hogties Cecilia himself, and then, unfortunately, goes back and double-checks Brian's and tightens him up. At this point, he's huge. He's like a huge man. He's not used to being threatened by other people. He's like the biggest guy he's ever seen. He thinks he's being carjacked. Part of him is almost interested in what's going on. Like, he's like, well, guess I'm going through a robbery, almost. And he's like, hey, if you're going to leave us out here, like, maybe just let us get up because it's very fucking cold out here and it's getting dark. And he's like, hey, is the gun loaded? Because like I said, he's almost like, I don't want to say he's enjoying himself, but he
doesn't think he's as in much danger as he actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. And he hears stories that, and this is from his testimony. You hear stories that sometimes people are too scared to end up actually shooting somebody. So when they do a holdup or whatever, they don't actually load the gun.
Yeah. Okay. Got you.
But the guy comes right up to him. And, you know, it's one of those guns where the clip comes out of the bottom of the handle. So he pops it out and is like, look at this shit, bitch. There's fucking bullets in there.
Bullets there. Wow, this is kind of neat, actually. Now I'm in danger.
Yeah, he's not messing around. Immediately after that, he stabs Brian with his giant foot-long knife 6 to 8 times. And it's so horrible, and Brian can't do anything. So he just decides to pretend like he's dead, and it totally works. And this guy moves on to Cecilia, stabs her 10 times, probably because she's moving around a lot more, trying to get him to stop because she saw what he did to Brian. Like, Brian wasn't scared because he didn't know he was about to get stabbed. He started getting stabbed probably before he realized. He said something like he started hearing the sound before he realized that he was getting stabbed.
Yeah, your body just immediately puts you into shock.
Pretty crazy. When he's done, the man calmly walks the quarter-mile back over to Brian's white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. And on the right side door with the black felt tip pen, he writes, Vallejo, 12/20/68, 7/4/69, September 27th, 1969, 6:30, by knife. And below it, he writes the fucking crosshair symbol. At the same time, the man is writing on the door. Brian and Cecilia are up and screaming at Ronald Fong in the bay again. And after he takes off in his boat without coming ashore, with no idea that he'll ever return, Cecilia is now going down. She's not doing well. Brian kind of like says he hits kind of like a point where he's not going any lower. He's like, he like comes online and realizes that he might like be all right. Not all right, but he might be able to like make this. So he gets up and he like kind of goes like, I would say like 300 yards up the road until he runs into the 2 park rangers, because he takes a really long time to do this. He runs into the 2 park rangers who were sent to check on him once Fong made it over to the resort. So Fong made it to the resort and radioed to the rangers, and then they headed towards him. And they ran into each other as he was like bloodily walking up the road. They wrap the kids up to try and stop the bleeding as best they can, but the problem is that Lake Berryessa doesn't even have like bathrooms at this point. It's like a remote park. It's like state land and there's rangers, but there's not like trash cans or anything like that. You know what I mean? Takes almost an hour for the ambulance to get there. They're finally on their way to the hospital by 6 p.m., by 8 p.m. At 7:13, Napa sheriffs finally arrive on the scene. At 7:40, 30 miles away at 1231 Main Street in Napa, police dispatch officer Slate is called from a payphone. And here's Mathis with a dramatic reading of what was said.
I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. I'm the one that did it.
Again, cockily guessing it was a double murder when really he only killed one person. But this time, however,
God, and he's not even good at what he wants to do. The one thing he's trying to be good at, he keeps fucking failing at.
Well, we'll see if he fails or
not.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, even like, it's just, again, that mediocrity, even in the most heinous, like, low-level thing you can do, you still keep fucking it up.
This time, though, after he finishes making the call, he remembers that the ringback is what got him. And this time, he just doesn't hang up the phone. He just leaves it there. And 5 minutes later, after not being able... This is an amazing part of the story that I didn't know about before. 5 minutes later, after not being able to trace the call, they put out a call for help on, like, the general radio waves. And this guy, Pat Stanley, who is a news director at Kavon Radio, like local radio, he took action after hearing about it on the police scanner. And here is a quote from the guy for Jesse to read from the Napa Valley Register. Pretty amazing.
The receiver on the phone the Zodiac used was put down, but not hung up. Technology then was not like it is today. The phone company could only report that the call came from a pay telephone somewhere between Lake Berryessa and Napa. The Napa County Sheriff's Department wanted to find the phone, and fast, so virtually any official with a radio was asked to help. The reporter jumped into action. After a brief stop at the Sheriff's Department, I drove north on Main Street. Driving past a car wash in the historic Sam Key Laundry Building, I spotted a payphone, but thought the call must have come from closer to the lake, nearly 30 miles away. At the last second, though, I swerved my car toward the phone booth and was shocked to find the receiver off the hook. I used my own two-way radio back to Kavon, where I instructed the on-duty DJ to call police. They, in turn, told me not to move until officers arrived.
So isn't that crazy? He just like drove out and tried to find a phone off the hook and he fucking found it.
And it wasn't, apparently it's a lot of people. This was like a whole thing.
People were out looking.
This is something that I didn't look into. Maybe I will for next episode. I wonder how often there were payphones. Like, how often did you come across one? How many payphones were in that area? Were they like every block?
I mean, at the time, there would have been payphones at least every two, for sure.
Every couple blocks, yeah.
There's a lot of payphones, but like not that many in a town like this. But it wasn't like this was the closest payphone to Lake Berryessa.
Right. It's just an interesting. They were so prominent for so long.
We're talking about an hour and 10 minutes after this happened. So like he could have gotten pretty far. You know what I mean? At this point, the police get their first nice detailed interview with the Zodiac survivor and Brian Hartnell, who is like pretty lucid even shortly after, and finally start putting together some kind of psychological profile for the second version of our Phantom. They see him as a killer with a strange motivation, not just sex or money, and some sort of axe to grind against young couples, possibly more the women than the men, considering that it's men that are surviving these attacks and that he seems to like punish the women a little harder than the men. They imagine he likes to switch up his weapons between murders and always tries to kill near water at some type of remote lover's lane type place, and always likes to involve cars. They also noticed that he liked common days off for his killings, like weekends and holidays when he might feel lonely, and that likely for obvious reasons, they always happen closer to nighttime than daylight. However, Graysmith also goes out of his way at this point to mention that Zodiac standing there with his knife in that weird outfit is kind of like a dead ringer for Count Zaroff in the 1932 movie version of The Most Dangerous Game, which immediately reminds me of that cipher that the Hardens solved earlier when Zodiac says man is the most dangerous game.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And sure enough, when I went back to check, Graysmith mentioned the movie in that chapter too. And here's Mathis with an excerpt from that.
The 1932 RKO radio picture, based on Richard Connell's famous 1924 short story, is a tale of a mad hunter, Count Zaroff, who uses fake channel lights to lure passing ships onto the reefs just off his island stronghold. The survivors of the sunken vessels become human game to be hunted in the Count's private jungle. Quote, "My life has been one glorious hunt," he tells his prisoners. "It would be impossible for me to tell you how many animals I have killed. One night as I lay in my tent with this head of mine, a terrible thought crept like a snake into my brain. Hunting was beginning to bore me. When I lost my love for hunting, I lost my love of life, of love. Here on my island, I hunt the most dangerous game. Only after the kill, does man know the true ecstasy of love," says Zaroff. "It is the natural instinct. Kill, then love. When you have known that, you have known ecstasy."
It's basically the Liver King. And yeah, that's all.
Same thing, right?
That's all well and good on its own. Right? And tons of villains wear long sleeve black turtlenecks with dark boots, but not that many use Lugers and long scoped rifles and carry around extremely huge dumb knives and sheaths around their waist.
Yep.
And in case you doubt me, here are a bunch of links, or actually here's just like a bunch of pictures to the on the Internet Movie Firearms database, the IMFDB, which has a bunch of screenshots of Zaroff, complete with a Luger, a knife scabbard, and a scope rifle. So you can compare them. Have a look at these pictures and tell the people how similar they are to the Zodiac image. You'll see him. He's the guy in the black suit, he's not the heroic guy. But if you scroll a bit down, you can see better.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar. I mean, again, like you said too, it's just a very common, simple outfit as well.
Yeah, but he does have a Luger.
Yep.
Which the Zodiac used. He does have a big knife with the Zodiac used, and he does carry around a big giant rifle, which the Zodiac never officially uses a rifle, but you'll see why a rifle is still relevant. And that leads me to the question of what if the Zodiac didn't have a fixation on hot young couples at all? What if lovers' lanes are just naturally the most strategically practical human game?
So what you're saying is the government is right, and violent movies make violent criminals.
If you have not seen The Most Dangerous Game,
I have not.
There's a couple. There's a man and a woman being hunted by the guy. So like, it kind of checks out.
2 weeks go by. Suddenly we're down in San Francisco proper, the day before Columbus Day, October 11th, 1969, still in the same year. On the corner of Washington and Cherry in a safe, upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights. 2 minutes before 10 p.m. at 9:58, during a break in the action at a party going on in her house, a 14-year-old girl looks down out of her second-story window and 60 feet across the street to see a man in brown pants and a dark blue black parka, about 5'8", with glasses and a reddish crew cut, sitting in a cab, cradling the cab driver's head in his lap. He's possibly robbing him, possibly engaging in some kind of sex acts with him. So she calls the cops. She calls her 2 siblings over to see. Suddenly the whole party's now looking at the window. You know, it's like a little kickback, but they're all looking out the window. And while they're talking on the phone with the police, they watch him. He gets out of the car, walks around the cab, wipes it down with some kind of rag, and then just kind of like calmly walks away. They tell the police they're witnessing a crime in progress. They describe the same guy I just did to the police. 2 minutes later, at 10 on the dot, moments after the kids finish with the dispatcher, when 2 cops stop a stocky, clean-cut white guy lumbering down the street in the fog to see if he saw anything. He says he saw a man waving a gun around, headed in the opposite direction. They let that guy continue going off into the night, drive off after the gunman without even getting out of the car, trying to catch the killer as quickly as possible before he gets away. The cab driver was a 29-year-old San Francisco State student and part-time insurance agent who works night shifts in the cab from 9 to 5 a.m. To pay his way through school. That's the overnight shift, by the way. 30 minutes into his shift, 9:30 p.m., he accepts a fare over on 9th Avenue in San Francisco, from where he's at, over by the St. Francis Hotel, if you know where that is, a ways away from there. And on the way, trying to like make the most out of his drive time, he picks up another fare on the way to where he's going, because it's kind of on the way, who directs him to the intersection of Washington and Maple Street in Presidio Heights. When he gets there, the fare notices that there's a man walking in front of the cab, walking his dog. So he asked Paul to take the car down one more block. Paul Stein, I don't know if I said his name. He asked Paul Stein to take the car down one more block to Washington and Cherry. Just before 9:55, with the meter still running in the cab, the fare places a 9mm handgun close enough to Paul's head behind his left ear that when he pulls the trigger seconds later, the sound of the shot is so muffled that the kids don't even hear it across the street. The fare moves from the backseat to where the teenager saw him up front. He did his dirty business that he was doing, and then he vanished into the night. Or did he? At 10:10, just a little at, like, we're 12 minutes into this crime. 10:10, 2 officers finally arrive on the scene to find the kids from the house now coming down out into the street near an active murder scene. He ushers them into an alcove in front of their house, takes the suspect's description again. He realizes that somehow, the first time after the 911 call, the police put out a bolo for a black guy instead, and immediately jumps on the radio to correct it. False description has only been out 15 minutes, 10 minutes or so. The damage is done. Here's Jesse with a quote from Donald Fouke, one of the officers who stalked that stocky, lumbering white guy from their patrol car. Didn't take a close look at him, even though he would have been covered in blood at the time. Here's a quote.
We proceeded on Jackson Street toward Arguello? How do you say that?
Arguello, something like that.
Arguello probably is right. Continuing our search. As we arrived at Arguello Street, the description of the subject was changed to a white male adult, and, believing the suspect was possibly the one involved in the shooting, we entered the Presidio of San Francisco and conducted a search on West Pacific Avenue, the opposite side of the wall and the last direction we observed the suspect going. we did not find the suspect.
So yeah, extremely disappointing. Though it was the testimony of these police officers that led to the most popular Zodiac composite that we have today. When they updated it after becoming convinced that it was, in fact, Zodiac, they probably stopped that night. And I'm not saying that it's for the same reason, but I am not surprised that the cops were looking for a black guy. Anyway, a black glove was found in the cab on the passenger side floor. They pulled one casing from the car, one fingerprint, with only 8 of the possible 50 points of identification that fingerprints normally have was pulled from the beam between the front and rear windows of the car. The rest was just wiped away as they watched him kind of wipe, so they assume that's what happened. Typically, you need at least 12 points of identification on fingerprint for results to be taken seriously. I think I said that before on another episode of something, maybe from JFK. But yeah, there's 50 possible. You need 12. They had 8 here. 20 minutes after the correction goes out, we meet another major character in the Zodiac lore, as well as a player in the creation of Graysmith's book itself. And that's Homicide Inspector Dave Toski, who arrives on the scene at 10:30 p.m. With his partner Bill Armstrong, who were the on-call homicide team that night. You should pay attention to Toski. He'll be around for a while. And in the Fincher movie, which you should watch, he's played by Mark Ruffalo. So you know he's going to be important. That's an Avenger. It's the first Avenger of several Marvel-affiliated people that are in this movie. Mysterio doesn't count, but Jake Gyllenhaal also was in Marvel. 3 days later, on October 14th, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle receives a 5th letter now. We're up to 5 letters in this episode, which this time seems to include a piece of blood-stained fabric inside an envelope marked, quote, SF Chronicle, San Fran, Calif. Please rush to editor. Please rush to editor. Instead of the return address, again, just the symbol. Now, here's Mathis to read the letter to you.
This is the Zodiac speaking. Make sure and get this exactly right. BAVHETMHORIUIQ.
Oh, whoa. Sorry, man. I don't know what that was. Here's the real letter. Here.
This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Street and Maple Street last night. To prove this, here's a bloodstained piece of his shirt. I am the same man who did in the people in the North Bay area. The SF police could have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly instead of holding road races with their motorcycles, seeing who can make the most noise. The car drivers should have just parked their cars and sat there quietly waiting for me to come out of cover. School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
And there is that scoped rifle implication that we have. Even though he never uses it, there's an implication. And of course, again, it finishes with the symbol. Immediately, they hand the thing over to Toski and Armstrong, who become like the leads on the case. And that's like when he really gets locked into this case for like pretty much the rest of his like professional life. They test this letter. They confirm that the little bloody scrap is indeed a match to the fabric from Paul Stein's shirt that they found at the scene. And for the first time, they hand the letter over to Zodiac supporting character Sherwood Morrill, an expert in the currently rather pseudoscience-y fields of graphology and forensic handwriting analysis, who is quoted in his own obituary from 1988 as saying, quote, "Sometimes you feel like you're playing God when you shouldn't be," which is like a wild thing for a guy who, with his job to say. And which, in a story about a mysterious character who writes anonymous letters, is sort of the perfect thing to maintain plausible deniability for any given suspect, considering how central it becomes to a lot of the theories people love to work for this guy. You know what I mean? Like, the handwriting should not be considered nearly as much as it is, though I think in a superficial way, you can maybe rule some people out. You know what I mean? I think you can maybe see when it's definitely not the same guy's handwriting, but that's about as
I'm
good
still
as you
over
can do
here
with
thinking
this
about
type
the
of stuff.
Zodiac.
Don't worry about that guy.
Okay.
Don't worry about the Zodiac. That guy doesn't exist. Don't worry about him. Don't worry about the Zodiac. The Zodiac's fine. He'll be all right. There's much you can hear from him a lot more times. Look for Sherwood Morrill later too. He's like the Boba Fett of this story. They simply use him too much. By the end, he quote unquote clears 9,000 people. How could you possibly do that? Anyway, suddenly we're back on October 16th, where those 2 cops are being interviewed for the updated composite. And the updated description is that of a slightly older man than before, 35 to 40, with a thicker jaw and a barrel chest, coming in at least 200 pounds, reddish-brown crew cut, navy blue-black waist-length jacket, more like the one described at Lake Berryessa, heavy-rimmed glasses. If you look at this picture, I think that he looks like D.B. Cooper in this picture. Did I not? Here are the two pictures. You can see, I believe the one on the left is the updated one. I believe. This is also at ZodiacKillerFacts.com. But you can see the top of that one. There's like the two guys that look kind of the same. They look like D.B. Cooper, I'm saying.
This is what most UFO websites look like, too.
Yeah. I think the one on the left is the updated one. They look a little different from each other, but not much.
Not much, really. I would not. If you showed me both, I'd be like, that's the same guy.
Anyway, the next day, on October 17th, the letter is published. And understandably, it causes widespread panic among parents in the San Francisco area with the talk of all the buses and the shooting of the kids and all that. It causes police resources to be spread thin, giving school buses extra security, instructions to just keep on driving, even if Count Zaroff shows up and snipes out your tires. And in fact, just to give you an idea of how real this is and how serious it was taken, here's Jesse with an excerpt from the emergency bulletin as seen in The Graysmith.
To all law enforcement agencies, a San Francisco cabbie was murdered by an unknown psychotic who has threatened to wipe out a school bus, then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. 1. Continue driving the bus on a flat tire. Do not stop. 2. Tell children to get below the level of the window and lie on the floor. 3. The driver will continue driving and turn on all lights and sound the horn. 4. The school bus shall not be stopped until arriving at a well-populated area. 5. Upon arrival at this location, a local law enforcement agency should be notified immediately.
At this point in the Graysmith narrative, Zodiac mania has reached like a fever pitch. There's so much attention on the case, California State Attorney General C. Lynch convenes an actual Zodiac seminar, the San Francisco Hall of Justice, for cooperation between San Francisco, Napa, Solano, Benicia, Vallejo, San Mateo, Marin, the FBI, Naval Intelligence for the fucking cryptography, U.S. Postal Inspectors for the letters, Highway Patrols because of the cars, and the State Bureau of Identification and Investigation. Though at the end, most feel they're no closer to solving the case than they were when they started, which is the exact problem. And now, at this point, you've now seen every crime that's commonly definitively linked to Zodiac between almost all the theories. And I would say that at the end of today's halfway dip into the 5 phantoms of Zodiac, as we've reached such a natural stopping point at this point, there's just one more thing to do, and that is to tease the next one, Phantom number 3. For reasons that will become clear to you soon as we continue part 1 next week, the third idea of Zodiac is known as Sam. And to me, he represents a shift in our focus for the public away from thinking of Zodiac as someone who's responsible for specific crimes to someone who lives more in their own imagination. Like, for people who don't know the details of this crime and just know the name, the Zodiac, and the kind of vibe that he like writes letters and stuff, which is at this point, most people, because the internet does not exist and they're just kind of picking it up in flashes and it's kind of just like a sensation. Zodiac is just at this point, anybody that they want it to be. If your neighbor's too loud, it's probably the fucking Zodiac. Your boss is a creepy guy at work, he's the fucking Zodiac killer. That one dude who goes too hard into the RP at Ren Fair, he's the Zodiac. Podcast host, does too many ARG teases his audience all the time, makes up stuff, Chodiac. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying. Anyway, you come back next week, please, for the back 9 of the Graysmith Zodiac theory. There's still like 15 more Zodiac letters to go. And after that, watch us tear it all down, replace it with a new ideal and possibly even a much newer suspect, a bonus 6th phantom who we'll meet a few weeks later in part 4, right?
Yeah.
This has been the Chilluminati. You've been listening to Zodiac, the Great American Rabbit Hole. It's a show I'm very proud of. Thank you, Jesse and Mathis, for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Robert Graysmith. Contact me, Jarrett Kobeck, please. Deanna fucking rules. The mystery search continues. Goodbye.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by the I don't know who they are. There's two.
What?
Terrence Hill and Bud Spencer.
No.
Neo and Trinity.
No.
I don't understand, and I probably never will. Let me just tell you right now that there's two Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield.
I'm telling you, I think he literally just looked up famous duos
Cheech and Chong.
and has just been going through the list ever since.
I'm trying to dig deep. Which one of you is Dick Powell?
Me? Your name's Jesse Cox. I want Chilluminati. I want my necklace. I want Chilluminati. I want my
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by Alex and Jesse. Like a shooting star across the sky that's actually a UFO.